All right, in this lecture, we're going to go ahead and go over something called cross-contour lines. Now, what are cross-contour lines? Well, contour lines are the lines that make out the outside shape of, or the outside line of your shape. And cross-contour lines are lines that can be used to create the inside values of your shape. Now, let me show you the difference between just a normal contour line and a cross-contour line. So here we have a sphere, and we have a second sphere too. The first one, we're just going to use contour lines, straight ones, and they're not going to be cross-contour lines. So this means that, let's say that we have our shadow kind of more along this edge, like so. So I'm going to go ahead and start adding in that shading there. And I'm doing it just by adding contour lines. So lines can definitely be used to add value and shading and highlight to your artwork. But as you can see, these are just completely straight. And then I can add a second layer if I wanted to that's a little bit darker, like so. And then I could add a darker edge along here. And then that would kind of create my bounce light along this bottom edge. And I can also kind of bring in a little bit more of a lighter edge there to soften that edge. And so those are straight contour lines. Now these work pretty well, and depending on the style of artwork you're trying to create, these might work. Like let's say you're trying to recreate a Victorian styled or a turn of the century styled piece of artwork. This could definitely work because printing presses would very often print in this style with straight lines that would make up an image. But in most cases, you're probably not going to be doing that. So you want to go with cross contour lines. So what are cross contour lines? Well, cross contour lines are just lines that go along the surface of your actual object. So because this is a sphere, we wouldn't have straight lines going across. Otherwise, that would make that more of a flat surface, or at least it would look more flat. So what we want to do is we want to add in our contouring lines, but we want them to go along with the form. So for example, we can start with our darker shadow. That will make up the most of the shadow of our sphere. So we're just going to add in those lines, and they're going to have that same curve that will curve along with the sphere itself. And we can just go ahead and keep layering those in. But as you can see, you're probably getting the idea that cross-contouring lines are just lines that follow the shape of whatever it is that you're creating highlights and values on. And then we can go ahead and add in that darker area right here in the middle. So the idea is just to stay with that form of your shape. All right. Now, if you're still not understanding what cross-contour lines are, let's have a look at a square or a cube. So if we were to do this with just straight contouring lines, let's see how that would look. We're going to make this side our shadow side, and we're going to make this top part our highlight, and this side will be our mid-tone color. So first, we're going to start off by adding that shadow in like so. And as you can see, I'm just using straight lines. Then we're going to go ahead and add in some lighter lines on this side. And I want to add a little tiny bit of shadow on this top part too, even though it's our highlight. So what we'll do is we're going to relayer this a second time with a little bit darker lines. And then we're going to lightly add some lines along this top like so. So now this is creating the illusion that we have some form, some highlight, and some shadow, but it would look a lot more realistic if our contouring lines were actually going along the shape of our image, going along that surface. So I'm going to switch over to a sharpened pencil. So how would we do that? Well, let's start off with the shadow edge. So rather than going straight like this, we can create more of a surface illusion by going along with this line right here so that it's in correct perspective. So I'm just going to start adding those lines in like so. Great. Next, we want to go ahead and add in the highlight on this, or the shadow on this area. Now in this drawing, this is actually correct. This is actually crossing contour lines. So we can go ahead and just copy what we did there. You almost want to pretend like as if there's wooden slabs going across these surfaces. In what direction would those lines be going? And then let's go ahead and add it to the top. So for the top, we could either go straight across, but just to get the idea more across, we're going to go ahead and add them in this diagonal angle like so. Perfect. So these are examples of cross-contouring lines. They make your artwork look a lot better. Now let's go ahead and look at some real examples of where we've used cross-contouring lines in our eye drawing. So I'm going to put this aside, and then I'm just going to grab our previous eye drawing that we did. And let's have a look at what we've done here. So a really good example of where this cross-contouring line is happening is right here along this edge of the brow. So we have it kind of almost curving, and that's curving into the shape of our brow, which is underneath the skin. It's part of the skull. We're not going to get too much into that right now, but it's going along the form and the shape. Same with over here, we have more of a curve going downwards. And we also see that cross-contouring line on the eyelid where these lines, these shadow lines, are following the form and the shape of our eyelid. Same with over here, it's going in the same direction as our eyelid. And we even see that with our eyebrows. Now, even though our hairs are making it up, it's still kind of the same idea. So the hair is following the shape and the form of our eyebrow. Now let's go ahead and add some cross-contouring lines to our boot drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and set this drawing aside, and then I'm going to grab my boot drawing that we did from before. So we just have a basic, simple shape drawing or line drawing. What we want to do now is we want to add some highlights and values in there. Now don't worry if you don't understand how to add shadows and highlights and values. All I want you to do is look at your object or your boot if you're drawing a boot too, and I want you to study where those dark shadows are and where those lighter areas are, and I want you to try to recreate that by using cross-contouring lines. So for example, I'm going to have more of a dark shadow edge along this bottom area, like so, and when I add those in, I want to follow the shape of this boot. So rather than just doing straight lines like so, I want to actually follow the shape of this boot when I add in those shadows. Then there's probably going to be a little bit more shadow along this edge, so I'm going to go ahead and add it in like so, and this top surface is going to be left pretty bright because it's going to be being hit by the light. But you'll see how my cross-contouring shadows are following the form. That's the important part. We would probably be getting a shadow underneath this edge right here, just a little small one, so I can go ahead and add in some cross-contouring there. And then inside here, this is going to be a very interesting part, and this will really demonstrate how cross-contouring works. So in here, we're going to have a lot more shadow, but we don't just want to do straight lines across or fill it in with black, because it's more on these edges, there's going to be a lot darker shadows, and then this inner area is going to be a lot lighter. So we're going to add that in like so, and we want to follow the form, so it's going to curve around like so. And over here, we'll add a little bit darker, and then we can lighten this middle area. But you'll see I'm adding that curve in there because what's happening in there is it's kind of making a tornado, not a tornado, but like a funnel that's going down, or a cylinder. It's more of a cylinder shape, and so you want to really create that with your contouring lines. We can also add some contouring lines on the sole of our boot, so just like so, and we'll add some in right here. Now, this area right here is straighter than right there because this part of the boot is a flat, straight surface, and so that's why it looks like that. So it's okay to use straight lines sometimes. You just want to make sure that it's actually going along with the form of your boot. Alright, that brings us to the end of this lecture. So in this lecture, you learned all about cross-contouring lines. You learned that they're a lot better than just doing straight contouring lines, and they make your images look a lot more realistic. So just remember, cross-contouring lines are lines that are used to create the form of your object. They go along the same shape as your object, and that's what creates that form. Now, your assignment for this section of the course is to go ahead and find an object, or take the object that you've already been drawing, and go ahead and draw your line drawing, and then you're going to go ahead and you're going to add in your cross-contouring to your image. And I want you to try to spend as much time on this as possible. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile and really get your bang for your buck out of this course, I really recommend that you do this with a lot of objects, at least 5 different objects, and 20 would be better. The more you study, the better you're going to be. I know it seems like everybody says that, but it's because it's true. Practice makes perfect. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.